But that belief keeps people stuck, because the truth is far more encouraging. There is a much smaller number that completely changes how you experience money and life. And that number is $10,000. I'm Nick, and I spend an unhealthy amount of time thinking about money, psychology, and why some people seem calm and in control financially while others are constantly stressed, even when they earn decent incomes. If you've ever wondered what money actually changes at different levels, not just on paper but in your head, this video will probably hit home. Let's talk about what life feels like before that first 10,000. When you don't have savings, every decision carries weight. Grocery shopping becomes a strategy session. You compare prices down to the cent, not because you're disciplined, but because you're scared. A dinner invitation from friends turns into mental math and quiet anxiety. A small unexpected expense doesn't feel small. It feels dangerous. Living paycheck to paycheck isn't just a financial condition. It's a psychological state. Your brain stays in threat mode. You're constantly reacting instead of planning. You're putting out fires instead of building anything long term. And then something interesting happens when you finally see 5 figures in your account for the first time. Not because you plan to spend it, but because you don't need to. The biggest change isn't what you buy. It's how you think. Your relationship with risk starts to shift. When you have no savings, every risk feels reckless. Changing jobs, asking for a raise, learning a new skill, moving to a new place, all of it feels too dangerous. You cling to stability even when it's making you miserable, because instability feels like financial death. But when you have $10,000 sitting there quietly, doing nothing but existing, those same decisions start to feel manageable. You don't suddenly become fearless, but you're no longer paralyzed. You can breathe. You can pause. You can think. This is where psychology kicks in. Financial security lowers stress hormones in your body. That's not motivational talk, that's biology. When your brain knows you can survive a hit, it stops treating every inconvenience like a catastrophe. A check engine light goes from panic to annoyance. A medical bill goes from fear to problem solving. A job setback goes from desperation to strategy. That difference alone changes your entire quality of life. What most people don't understand is that an emergency fund isn't really about emergencies. It's about permission. Permission to think long term. Permission to make better decisions. Permission to not operate from fear. Ironically, many people who save $10,000 never actually use it for emergencies. They use it indirectly. They use it to take courses, to relocate, to wait for better opportunities, to invest in themselves. The money sits there, but its presence changes everything. Confidence starts to show up in subtle ways. You negotiate differently. You say no more often. You stop accepting bad deals just because you're scared. Desperation disappears, and with it goes a lot of bad decisions. And here's the part people underestimate. Saving $10,000 isn't just about math. It's about identity. You don't accidentally save that much money. You become someone who tracks spending, delays gratification, and thinks ahead. The hardest part isn't the last few thousand. It's the first one. Saving your first $1,000 feels brutal. It requires sacrifice, awareness, and constant effort. But once the habit forms, momentum takes over. The second 1,000 is easier. The fifth feels automatic. By the time you approach 10, you're no longer forcing discipline. You're living it. This identity shift matters more than the money itself. Because once you prove to yourself that you can save 10,000, you know you can save 20. And once you know you can save 20, investing no longer feels intimidating. It feels logical. $10,000 also has a very practical advantage. It covers most real-life problems. Car repairs, minor medical emergencies, job gaps, family issues. These are the things that keep people trapped financially, and most of them cost far less than people fear. Once you cross that threshold, you're insulated from the chaos that ruins progress. And here's a quiet truth. Someone with 10,000 saved is often in a stronger position than someone earning twice as much with nothing saved. Income is important, but control is more important. Plenty of high earners are financially fragile. Plenty of modest earners are surprisingly secure. The difference is not intelligence. It's behavior. Money starts to feel different at this level. It stops feeling like something that disappears and starts feeling like something that works for you. You become curious about investing, not because you want to get rich overnight, but because you finally have the mental space to think beyond next month. This is where opportunity starts to appear. A certification that costs a few thousand but increases income long term. A relocation that improves quality of life. A side project that requires start-up capital. Without savings, these are fantasies. With savings, they're choices. Even sleep improves. That sounds dramatic, but it's real. Financial stress is one of the biggest contributors to insomnia. Remove the constant fear, and your body finally relaxes. Better sleep leads to better decisions, better work performance, and better relationships. And relationships do change. Money stress leaks into everything. It affects how you show up with friends, partners, family. When that pressure eases, patience increases. Presence increases. You stop carrying silent resentment and anxiety into every interaction. $10,000 doesn't make you rich. You still think before spending. You still budget. You still say no. But you stop suffocating. You gain breathing room. And breathing room is where growth begins. The real power of this milestone isn't what it buys. It's what it removes. Fear. Urgency. Desperation. Constant calculation. If you're starting from zero, this might feel far away. But no one saves 10,000 all at once. They save 50. Then 100. Then a little more. Consistency beats intensity every time. The person you become while building that first financial cushion is the real reward. Someone calmer. Someone more intentional. Someone who understands that money is not about stuff, but about options. $10,000 won't solve all your problems. But it will silence most of the noise. And once the noise fades, you finally get to think clearly about the life you actually want to build. And that clarity is worth more than the money itself. At some point, after the panic fades and the constant stress quiets down, something unexpected happens. You stop thinking about money all the time. Not because you have unlimited amounts of it, but because it's no longer screaming for your attention every second of the day. And when money stops being loud, you finally get to hear your own thoughts clearly. This is when people realize that financial security isn't about luxury. It's about silence. It's about the absence of fear. It's about waking up and not immediately checking your bank account like you're bracing for bad news. Before this stage, money dominates your inner dialogue. Every plan comes with an asterisk. Every dream feels conditional. You don't ask, "What do I want to do?" You ask, What can I afford to do without everything falling apart? But once you build that base, even a modest one, the questions change. You start asking better questions. Questions that point forward instead of backward. What kind of work do I actually want to do? What kind of days do I want to live? What would my life look like if fear wasn't making the decisions for me? And here's the thing most people don't realize. Those questions are expensive. Not in dollars, but in mental space. You can't ask them when your brain is consumed with survival. You need margin. You need room to think. This is why financial progress often looks boring from the outside. It's not flashy. It's quiet. It's repetitive. It's someone making the same good decision over and over, long after the excitement is gone. Consistency doesn't feel heroic. It feels dull. And that's why it works. At this stage, you also start to notice something strange about other people. You realize how many decisions are driven by insecurity. How much spending is emotional. How many choices are made to impress, to cope, to distract. And you stop judging it, because you've been there. You understand now. When people don't feel safe, they look for relief anywhere they can find it. Sometimes that relief comes in the form of shopping, status, experiences they can't really afford. But once you feel safe, those impulses lose their grip. You don't need money to prove anything. You don't need purchases to validate your worth. You begin to understand a quiet truth: real confidence doesn't announce itself. This is also where patience starts to become your biggest advantage. When you're financially fragile, you rush. You chase quick wins. You jump at opportunities without evaluating them properly because waiting feels dangerous. But when you're stable, you can afford to wait. And waiting is powerful. You wait for better jobs instead of taking the first offer. You wait for better investments instead of chasing hype. You wait for clarity instead of forcing decisions. And because you wait, your outcomes improve. Over time, this patience compounds in ways that are hard to explain until you experience it. People start trusting you more. Employers notice you're calm. Opportunities find you instead of the other way around. Not because you're smarter, but because you're not desperate. Desperation is loud. Calm is magnetic. Another shift happens in how you view time. When you're struggling financially, time feels like an enemy. Every day that passes without progress feels like failure. You're constantly behind, constantly catching up. But with stability, time becomes an ally. You understand that progress doesn't need to be immediate to be meaningful. You stop rushing your life. You stop measuring success by speed and start measuring it by direction. Are things improving? Even slowly? Are you more stable than you were last year? Are your decisions aligning better with your values? If the answer is yes, you relax. Because you know momentum doesn't require drama. This is where people start building real wealth, often without realizing it. Not because they found a secret strategy, but because they stopped sabotaging themselves under pressure. They invest regularly. They avoid catastrophic mistakes. They keep their expenses reasonable. They let time do the work. And time, when paired with consistency, is ruthless in your favor. You also begin to understand opportunity cost at a deeper level. Not in a spreadsheet sense, but in a life sense. You realize that every big financial decision shapes your future more than hundreds of small ones. Where you live matters. Who you work for matters. What you commit to matters. So instead of obsessing over small purchases, You focus on the big levers: income, housing, lifestyle, and long-term investments. This shift alone puts you ahead of most people. Because most people are exhausted by pennies while ignoring thousands. As your financial confidence grows, something else fades away: envy. You stop comparing yourself to others because you understand that most visible success is financed by debt and stress. You see the cars, the vacations, the lifestyle, and you wonder what the monthly payment looks like. You wonder what the sleep quality is like. You wonder how much pressure is hiding behind the image. And you're grateful for your boring progress. Boring progress pays dividends. At this stage, money becomes boring too. And boring is good. Boring means predictable. Boring means stable. Boring means sustainable. You're no longer chasing excitement. You're building a system. A system where money flows in, expenses stay controlled, investments grow, and stress stays low. And once you have a system, you stop relying on motivation. You don't need to feel inspired to do the right thing. You just do it because it's who you are now. Identity drives behavior. This is the part people never show on social media. The quiet evenings. The spreadsheets. The routine transfers. The decisions that don't look impressive but change everything over decades. This is where freedom is built. Not freedom to spend recklessly, but freedom to choose intentionally. Freedom to say no. Freedom to slow down. Freedom to pivot when needed. Freedom to protect your peace. Eventually, you reach a point where money stops being the main character in your life. It supports the story, but it's not the plot anymore. And that's the real goal. Not wealth for its own sake. Not numbers for ego. But a life where money doesn't control your mood, your sleep, or your self-worth. A life where you wake up calm. Where problems feel solvable. Where the future feels open instead of threatening. That kind of life isn't built overnight. It's built quietly, patiently, one good decision at a time. And if you stay consistent long enough, one day you'll realize you're no longer chasing stability. You're living inside it. And that's when money finally becomes what it was always supposed to be. A tool. A buffer. A background detail. Not a source of fear. Not a source of identity. Just a means to live a life that feels steady, intentional, and free. And that, more than any number in a bank account, is real wealth. There's another quiet shift that happens once money stops being a constant emergency, and it has nothing to do with numbers. It's how you experience uncertainty. Before, uncertainty feels threatening. Not knowing what's coming next keeps you tense, alert, exhausted. Every unknown feels like danger. But when you have a financial buffer, uncertainty starts to feel neutral. Sometimes it even feels exciting. You realize that not everything needs to be planned perfectly. That mistakes don't automatically equal disaster. That life has room for experimentation. This is something people without savings rarely get to experience. They live in a narrow tunnel where every step must be safe, predictable, and reversible. But with stability, the tunnel opens up. You begin to understand that progress doesn't always look like moving forward in a straight line. Sometimes it looks like stepping sideways. Sometimes it looks like pausing. Sometimes it even looks like stepping back temporarily to reposition. And because you're not panicking, you allow yourself to make those moves thoughtfully instead of emotionally. This is where long-term thinking really takes root. You stop asking, what feels good right now, and start asking, what will I be grateful for in 5 years? That question alone changes everything. It changes how you spend weekends. It changes how you choose work. It changes how you approach learning. You become willing to do things that don't immediately pay off, because you trust the process now. You trust yourself. Another thing that quietly disappears is urgency culture. The constant pressure to keep up, to move faster, to optimize every second. When money is tight, urgency feels necessary. When money is stable, urgency often reveals itself as anxiety in disguise. You slow down. And slowing down doesn't make you less productive. It makes you more precise. You stop multitasking your life. You stop chasing every opportunity. You stop confusing movement with progress. Instead, you focus. And focused effort compounds far more efficiently than scattered effort ever will. This is also when people start developing boundaries. Real boundaries. Not just with money, but with time, energy, and attention. When you're financially insecure, boundaries feel dangerous. Saying no feels risky. Turning things down feels irresponsible. But once you're stable, you realize boundaries are protective, not selfish. You don't overextend yourself anymore. You don't say yes out of guilt. You don't trade peace for approval. And that changes how people treat you. You become more respected, more trusted, more valued. Not because you demand it, but because you no longer signal desperation. There's also a deeper emotional shift that happens here. You stop tying your self-worth to your bank balance or your job title. When money is no longer a daily threat, it loses its power to define you. You are no longer your income. You are no longer your expenses. You are no longer your financial mistakes. You're just a person making progress. That separation is incredibly freeing. It allows you to grow without shame. To learn without fear. To improve without self-judgment. And growth without shame is sustainable. At this stage, people often notice that their goals become clearer. Not bigger, but clearer. You stop chasing vague ideas of success and start defining what success actually means to you. Maybe it's flexibility. Maybe it's stability. Maybe it's time. Maybe it's creativity. Money becomes a supporting actor instead of the main character. And because of that, you make smarter decisions with it. You're no longer trying to impress anyone. You're trying to build something that lasts. This is also when you begin to truly understand the cost of stress. Chronic financial stress doesn't just feel bad. It steals years of your life. It affects your health, your relationships, your focus. Once you've lived on both sides of that stress, you never want to go back. So you protect your foundation. You don't gamble with it. You don't rush it. You don't sacrifice it for short-term excitement. You treat your financial stability the same way you'd treat your physical health. Not obsessively, but consistently. Because you've learned something important, stability creates capacity. Capacity to think. Capacity to plan. Capacity to enjoy life. And enjoyment changes too. It becomes quieter. Deeper. Less performative. You don't need everything to be extraordinary. Ordinary days start feeling good. A calm morning. A focused afternoon. An unhurried evening. You stop waiting for life to begin. It already has. Eventually, you realize that many of the things you once thought required more money actually required less stress. More presence. More clarity. And that realization stays with you. No matter how much you earn later. No matter how large your investments grow. you remember what it felt like to struggle. And that memory keeps you grounded. It keeps you intentional. It reminds you that wealth isn't about excess. It's about margin. Margin in your finances. Margin in your schedule. Margin in your mind. And once you have margin, life becomes flexible instead of fragile. So if you're in the middle of building right now, and it feels slow, and it feels quiet, and it feels like nothing dramatic is happening, that's a good sign. You're laying a foundation. And foundations are never exciting to look at. But they determine everything that comes next. Stay consistent. Stay patient. Stay intentional. Because the calm you're building now will support every future version of yourself. And one day, without fanfare, you'll realize that money no longer controls your emotional state. It supports your life quietly, in the background. Exactly the way it should. Imagine this for a moment. It's 3 in the morning. The room is quiet, your phone is face down on the nightstand, and you're staring at the ceiling while your brain runs through a highlight reel of everything that could go wrong financially. Your car could refuse to start. Your laptop could suddenly die. Your boss